Hey guys, what's up? This is Bharat. You're watching iGyaan, and recently Huawei just launched the P20 Pro along with the P20 and the Mate RS. We checked out the P20 Pro in our unboxing video recently. If you guys haven't already checked it out, I'll leave a link in the description below and on the top right of this video right now. But with a mix of 3 cameras at the back, one with a whopping 40 megapixel sensor, the Huawei P20 Pro makes for a really good camera phone, or does it? While I was in Paris for the launch, I decided to put it head to head with the 3 other phones that I had at that time with me. So the iPhone X, the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus and the Moto Z2 Force. How do these phones fare? I'll show you the images and let you guys decide for your own. So pull out your pens and papers, let's start scoring. Let's talk about the first phone. The Huawei P20 Pro has a triple camera setup with a 40 megapixel f1.8 primary camera. It does have optical image stabilization and a 1/1.7 inch sensor. You do get a secondary 20 megapixel sensor with an f1.6 aperture and a tertiary zoom lens, which is an 8 megapixel sensor with an f2.4 aperture. All of these are covered with Leica optics, which are said to be fantastic, and like I mentioned, it can do a 3x optical zoom. The iPhone X, which is Apple's flagship, does have a dual camera setup with the first camera at a 12 megapixel sensor, an f1.8 aperture equipped 28mm lens, and the second one is a 12 megapixel sensor, f2.4 aperture equipped 52mm telephoto lens, so giving it a 2x optical zoom. The Moto Z2 Force does have dual cameras as well, both of which are 12 megapixel and both of which have an f2 aperture. Both of which have 1/2.9 inch sensor and a 1.25 micron pixel size. The Galaxy S9 Plus also has dual 12 megapixel cameras, one with an f1.5 to f2.4 variable aperture lens. The secondary is a 12 megapixel camera with an f2.4 52mm lens, giving it a 2x optical zoom. All of these shots were shot in auto mode with almost all default settings, so no customizations or post-processing has been added to these images. So the first image comes bright and early in the morning through the window of a cafe. You can see that all of these have an equal amount of reflection, with the Samsung Galaxy S9 doing the best job of moving past the reflection and giving more focus and more attention towards the building. So if we zoom into one of the windows, you can see that the S9 gets a good amount of sharpness. So does the Huawei P20. I do find the images slightly darker on both of these phones. The iPhone X does a good job of brightening the color of the building and giving us an accurate color as well. The Moto Z2 still brighter than the Huawei P20 and the Samsung S9, but a little bit of a shift in terms of the color of the pavement and the building itself. The second image is similar, but I pointed slightly upwards towards the sky to see how HDR works on these phones through the glass of a window. Again, you can see on the Huawei P20, AI kicked in and it recognized the sky as a blue sky and filled it in with post-processing color, and you can see the tint of everything, including the car, including the pavement, including the building, and the windows in the building has converted into a higher or a deeper tint of blue, and it's also filled in a lot of blue color into the sky. So P20 extremely artificial, but it looks good on the phone as well as on the screen. The iPhone X does a good job of reproducing the color of the sky. So does the Moto Z2, and the S9 seems a little bit flat in capturing the right kind of contrast for the sky. Next up is a food shot. Again, with the Huawei P20, it picks up in AI the food mode, and you can see that it enhances the color quite a lot, but it loses out a little bit on sharpness. The Samsung S9 and the iPhone X look almost identical in terms of the rawness of the image, so it's quite flat. The Moto Z2 also fills in a little bit of color, but you can see the tint of the color is slightly more yellowish, whereas the S9 and iPhone X seem a little more flat. So if you're just looking at this image on Instagram, I think the Huawei P20 does a better job of filling in extra color. Next up, again, another example of HDR Outdoors. You can see the Arc de Triomphe in Paris over here, and on the Moto Z2, you can see the color of the pavement has changed to a pinkish hue, as well as the color of the building seems to be slightly pinkish. The Huawei P20 adds in a lot of blue in the sky, detects it as a blue sky in the AI, and then fills in a lot of blue color. Samsung S9 seems to give a faded out sort of sky, whereas the iPhone X gives a good amount of light as well as sky. Also in terms of HDR, you can see the inside of the arch is visible quite well on the Moto Z2 as well as the iPhone 10 and the S9. It remains slightly dark on the P20 because it's filling the image with a lot of contrast and post-processing in terms of adding this blue color for the sky, so the inside of the arch is not as visible. But all in all of these did a good job of capturing good amounts of focus and sharpness on the building itself. Now the next image is a good example of where a 40 megapixel shot would come in really handy. So on the Huawei P20 you can really zoom in and see there's a cabin over here, and you can see that there's a boat on the bottom left. There's also a lamp hanging from the bridge on the right of the image. So the Huawei P20 will come in handy for larger shots like these, where if you want to zoom into your subject later on, you can do that with the 40 megapixel shot. As far as color is concerned, again the Huawei P20 AI kicks in the auto mode and fills up the color, making this image look slightly artificial, but it looks fantastic on the screen as well. So that is definitely a good thing. The iPhone 10 and the Samsung S9 do a good job of capturing the natural environment. The Moto Z2 seems slightly yellowish if you look at the color of the water, seems slightly yellowish, but overall all three of the other phones did a good job of getting a more natural looking image, whereas on the P20 it looks a little enhanced even though it's in auto mode. This image is, by the way, at Disneyland Paris, and so is the next one. This is the Pirates of the Caribbean installation. So you can see the ship over here. On the Huawei P20 it darkens out the image quite a lot, so the skull as well as the ship is not very visible. The iPhone 10 does a good amount of managing contrast, so you see the skull properly and the ship properly as well. The Samsung S9 seems extremely flat and the ship seems extremely faded, so we don't get a good amount of contrast on this image. The Moto Z2 also similar, not a good amount of contrast. I'd say the best image in this one is the iPhone 10. The Huawei P20 again filling it with artificial colors, so while it does look good, you can't really make out the skull properly. Next up, again this is Disneyland Paris, and you can see the sky, 4 completely different hues of the sky. As far as blue is concerned, I'd say that the Samsung S9 and the iPhone 10 are the closest to the actual color of the sky. Huawei P20 again adding a lot more color, and even though it looks oversaturated and good to the visual eye, it's not a more natural set, so you can score yourself based on whatever image you like. Now this is an indoor shot with low light. This is again a good example of backlighting, and you can see that all of these cameras perform equally well. Good amounts of contrast, good amounts of light capture, and even in low light environments, I'd say that the Samsung S9 and the Huawei P20 did a fairly good job. The iPhone 10 struggling a little bit in getting focus and light control over the image. Now this is an outdoor shot. Again, you can see different hues of the sky in all of these images. We get a good amount of focus in all the phones. Again, the Huawei P20, you can zoom in quite a lot into the window of this castle over here. So you can zoom in quite a lot and you can see the window. So that helps. The 40 megapixel shot definitely helps with that. Here, I think the iPhone 10 did the best job in getting the purple color of the flowers. So you can see that the yellow tint and the purple tint is more visible on the iPhone 10 properly, whereas on the Moto Z2, it seems to be slightly brighter, and also on the S9 it seems to have struggled with isolating the colors. The iPhone 10 Huawei P20 seemed to do a better job, and the iPhone 10 I think does the best job in this image. Now here in the macro shot is where the P20 struggled quite a lot to get focus. The Samsung S9 got a really good image, so did the Moto Z2. A really good amount of focus on the subject and good colors on all of these phones. More or less the colors seem to be accurate in a close-up shot. Now here's another good example of light play. In auto mode, you can see the iPhone 10 captures the actual color, according to what my eye was seeing, the actual color of these light panels on the left. So the yellow bright light of the light panels, the iPhone 10 gives the right yellow tint, whereas the P20 seems to be a darker image than usual. The S9 Plus manages the light well, but it changes the hue of the image quite a lot. Now this is a good example. Now this is at 0 zoom, so this is at a completely full wide, at a look at the Eiffel Tower from a distance. All of these images, again different hues of the sky. The iPhone 10 doing one of the best jobs over here in getting the right color and right sharpness, right contrast. The S9 Plus also doing a fantastic job of sharpness and contrast. If we move into natural optical zoom, so the Huawei P20 gets a 3x optical zoom, so you see a slightly bigger image, and that's the amount of difference it makes with a 3x versus a 2x. So the iPhone 10 is at 2x, so is the Moto Z2, and so is the S9 Plus. Again, as far as colors are concerned, the iPhone 10 and S9 Plus seem to be doing a better job of color, saturation and contrast. The P20 still adding more color than required, so post-processing is going on in this situation. Now here's a 5x zoom. So the P20 gets a hybrid 5x zoom, which uses a little bit of the 40 megapixel sensor mixed with the optical zoom to give you a lossless 5x image. So all in all, a good amount of sharpness, and the Samsung S9 also does a good job of getting good amount of sharpness on the tower, and you can see the blocks quite easily visible. The iPhone 10 seems faded, colors seem to be lost, and that's because it's doing a pure digital zoom and is not doing a good job of it. The Moto Z2 colors seem to be off in auto mode, and also seems to have overexposed or over sharpened the Eiffel Tower, so it looks a little digital or pixelated. So this is a great example of a portrait shot from the rear cameras, especially when you have a good subject like this. So you can see on the iPhone 10 and the Samsung Galaxy S9, the contrast and the color of the sweatshirt is pretty much accurate. On the P20, it seems a little flat, and also you can see a lot more of the background. So you can make out a lot more of the background on the P20. The Moto Z2 and the iPhone 10 have seemed to overexpose the background. The P20 and the S9 managing most of the background, with the S9 getting a little less in terms of defocus, whereas the P20 getting a good amount of bokeh in the background. Now all of these devices seem to have managed to isolate the foreground from the background quite well. Even around the hair and ear, you can see that the corners and the edges are really sharp, which means that all of these phones, depending on which one you like the most, do a good job of portrait. Now this is a front-facing camera shot while I was standing inside the hotel room. You can see the Eiffel Tower in the background. In terms of HDR from the front, I think the iPhone 10 has done the best job in this picture, where you can see a lot more of the foreground, including my face, and you can also see the clouds and everything in all entirety. The P20 Pro in this image comes in a close second. You can make out a little bit of the clouds, and you can see the Eiffel Tower, a lot of my face, so a lot of brightness in the foreground as well. The Samsung S9 Plus and the Moto Z2 Force seem to have struggled with getting the right kind of exposure for the sky, so less visibility on the clouds, but you can see a sharp Eiffel Tower in both of them, so you will still get the shot, but you will get a lot more detail as it appears on the iPhone 10 and the Huawei P20. Here's a good example of video from a low light situation. So we'll play these videos one by one, and then you guys can be the judge of the sound quality as well as the video itself. Thailand. Now finally, this is a video again from Disneyland at the bridge. The problem is that I somehow have lost the video from the Moto Z2 Force in this one. So just have a look at the video samples of all of these devices and decide for yourself. All of these are shooting at 4K, the S9 Plus and the iPhone 10 at 4K at 60 frames per second, the P20 at 4K at 30 frames per second. The final example is between the iPhone 10 and the Huawei P20 Pro. I'm walking down the stairs with both of these phones in my hand. Both of them are recording at 4K resolution. The only problem is that the P20 does not have optical image stabilization or even electronic image stabilization at 4K, whereas the iPhone does. So this is a good example of shooting 4K while moving or while walking downstairs. Just have a look at this. So that's it for this video. The Huawei P20 Pro is expected to be launched in India end of April or early May. We'll keep you posted on launch and availability as far as India is concerned, also pricing details as soon as we get them. If you guys have any questions or queries regarding the Huawei P20 Pro, do let us know in the comment section below. If you like this video, don't forget to smash that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're not already a part of Team iGyaan. This has been Bharat. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one.